If you're like me and you also have a really hard time making those big decisions that could change the trajectory of your life, you're probably also pretty familiar with the feeling of decision paralysis. Quitting a job, ending a relationship, these types of big decisions cause you to either procrastinate and avoid thinking about it, or mull over and analyze all the options countless times in your head. Making decisions is hard, but avoiding or overthinking decisions is harder because it delays our decision making, and indecision isn't without its own set of negative consequences that will eventually catch up to you. The good news today, though, is that we can all learn to become better decision makers because decision making is a learned skill. And today, I'm going to show you how you can build that skill. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Audrey. I'm currently practicing as a therapist, and in this video, I wanted to give my fellow indecisive people out there a tool that is commonly used in therapy to help overcome decision paralysis and make a decision that you won't regret and that you'll be really happy that you made. Let's get into it. Maybe this has happened to you before. You come to one of these inflection points in life and you find that your brain is telling you to go down one way, but your heart, for lack of a cheesier term, is telling you to go down the other way. After a really frustrating day at work, your heart might be screaming at you to go into the office tomorrow, hand in your resignation, and instead go start something of your own and become your own boss. But your brain might be telling you to just keep sticking it out because it makes sense. It's a stable and desirable job that pays your bills on time. In these moments when your brain and your heart are at odds with each other is where this therapy tool comes in handy the most, because it can be used to help you resolve that internal conflict and ultimately make the best decision for you. So this is a tool from dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, which is an evidence-based therapy. And DBT says that there are 3 mental states from which we can make decisions. The first state is from the rational mind. The rational mind is all about the facts. She is driven by logic and reasoning and what makes sense, often at the expense of her feelings and wants and needs. In fact, she often pushes down and ignores her feelings and needs because she sees them as interfering with her logical decision making. So you can probably find rational mind pushing herself through a job that makes her really unhappy because it's the most practical thing to keep staying. You can probably also find her if she's questioning whether or not to stay in her current relationship, doing a risk-benefit analysis of staying versus leaving. The second mental state is the emotional mind. The emotional mind is fiery, passionate, and often impulsive. Her moods and urges are in the driver's seat, and she acts according to how she feels. She is all about chasing pleasure and doing what feels good, often to alleviate some sort of short-term distress. So she's probably going to be the one who's more likely to react in the heat of the moment and lash out at her partner in an argument, or quit her job and buy a one-way ticket to Bali after a frustrating day of work. Now, before I share with you what the third mental state is, I really invite you to take a moment and reflect on which of these 2 states of mind do you find yourself in more often. Most of us are either more rationally minded or more emotionally minded, often due to our past experiences. And next, I invite you to reflect on, has being more either rationally minded or emotionally minded gotten you into trouble in the past? Let's take me as an example. So historically, I have been a more rationally minded person, and I have a feeling that most of you watching this video are also more rationally minded. So let me know. I'd love to know in the comments if you also resonate with what I'm about to say. Historically, I have always done what makes sense. I was studious, I got a good degree, I got that traditional 9-to-5. I also took pride in being a logical person and in the fact that I valued logic over emotion. But looking back, this way of thinking has gotten me into a lot of trouble. I was completely ignoring my feelings and needs so that I could continue to push through a situation that was making me inherently unhappy, whether that be a job situation or a relationship situation, because it was the more practical thing to do at the time. And I mean, you can only ignore your feelings and needs for so long before your body just has enough of your shit and is tired of being ignored. And it stops listening to your logic altogether and instead forces you to listen to it. Maybe you get sick or you are physically unable to get out of bed, and that is your body's way of rebelling against you being too rationally minded for too long. We can keep making decisions that logically make sense. We can stay in that job or that relationship because it's what's most practical and seems the least risky. What we might not realize, though, is that there is also significant risk involved in only looking at what's practical and neglecting to also look at how everything all makes us feel. We risk losing out on really important insight from our emotions, and as a result, we risk limiting ourselves and our potential. And I don't know about you, but that sounds really risky to me. But we also do have to acknowledge that on the other end of the spectrum, there are also risks to being too much in emotional mind. Even as a more rationally minded person, I've had my moments where my emotions have just gotten the best of me, usually when I've been ignoring my emotions for too long. Being too much in emotional mind usually means overlooking or not thinking through the objective facts about our situation and instead making a rash decision or a premature decision that we're probably going to regret later, such as drinking a whole bottle of wine to yourself after a stressful day at work, only to wake up with the hangover of life and still have to go to work the next day, or texting a toxic ex trying to get closure only to make things worse and reopen that wound. There is a lot of self-help advice out there telling us to follow our heart, and I'm all for following our heart and doing what feels best and everything, but it's also really important to understand that there is a crucial difference between doing what feels best and doing what feels right. So this is where the third state comes in, and the third state is wise mind. When we're in wise mind, we're able to access our rational mind and our emotional mind at the same time. Often logic and emotion are seen as mutually exclusive, but it is possible to integrate the two by being in wise mind. If you're a mostly rationally minded person, being in wise mind is going to look like taking all the logic, all the facts, and cross-checking it against your emotions. If you're a mostly emotionally minded person, being in wise mind is going to look like recognizing your emotions instead of reacting to them, and instead responding to them in a rational way. Some people like to equate wise mind with our gut instinct, and I do think our gut is a credible source of information. I mean, they don't call it the second brain for no reason. Others might think of wise mind as the best version of you, your ideal self. Or if you're in the spiritual niche, you might like to think of wise mind as your highest self. Whatever you'd like to think of it as, wise mind gives us everything we need to make the right decision for us that honors our feelings and wants and needs, and is also grounded in logic, so it's still reasonable and realistic. Wise mind decisions are also going to be ones that are most in line with our core values. I've talked so many times on this channel about how important it is to know your core values, but I will not stop talking about it. Then, what are your core values? I think we know that Finn's core values are food, chewing on things, jumping on people, and love. Clinical psychologist Susan David says that your values provide the compass that keeps you moving in the right direction, which means that to even know what the right direction is, we need to know what our values are first. So at this stage, if you've never done one before, I highly recommend doing a values exercise to figure out what your values are. There are tons of versions out there on the internet, or if you think this would be helpful for you, I do have a values exercise in a Notion worksheet that I will leave linked in the description. Now, by this point, I know you're probably thinking, "Kay, Wise Mind sounds great and all, but how do you actually use it to make a decision?" We're going to talk about that right now. So in this next part of the video, I'm going to walk you through a quick, simple 10-minute exercise that you can do to access your wise mind. This exercise involves mindfulness meditation. Now, don't walk away yet. I know some of you might be rolling your eyes, some of you might be intimidated, but I promise to make this as simple and as fluff-free as possible. Just stay with me. We're going to find our wise mind. So the first thing I'd like us to do is find a comfortable space where you won't be interrupted. Take a comfortable seat and set a timer for 10 minutes. Now close your eyes and settle into your breathing and place your awareness on your breath. So if you find it helpful, you can put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly and feel how your torso moves as you inhale and exhale. Take 10 deep, long breaths, or however many you need to get into a relaxed state. And being in this relaxed state is how we're going to access our wise mind. Now, once you're in a relaxed state, think about the decision that you're trying to make. Just think about it. Let your mind do its thing and go wherever it wants to go. Just observe what is the main issue coming up for you. Now, once you've identified the main issue, this is where we're going to ask our wise mind a question about how to approach the issue. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to inhale as we ask the question, and then we're going to exhale and listen for an answer. So inhale, ask, and exhale, listen. Now, an answer might not come to you on the first inhale, and that's totally okay and normal. We're going to keep inhaling and exhaling and listening for an answer. Now, it's really important at this stage to not talk out loud. We're just sitting in silence, saying the question in our head and listening for an answer instead of saying it out loud. It's also really important to try not to force an answer or answer it like you normally would, but instead to listen for an answer from our wise mind or our gut instinct. Visualize how your ideal self would respond in the situation. And if an answer comes to you, just accept it, don't judge it, don't resist it, and instead notice how your body is reacting to the answer. Now, once your 10 minutes are up, it's really important to reflect on the exercise and write down whatever answer came to you. Please do not skip this step. This is what's really going to help solidify this exercise in our minds. And if you didn't get an answer, that's okay. Write that down too. It's completely normal and okay if you didn't get an answer, especially the first few times you do this exercise. But if we keep giving it another try the next day and the next day, we will eventually get an answer. And it's going to get much easier with each time you do it because the exercise is already going to be more familiar to you. If you did get an answer though, once you've written it down, it's a good idea to double check that this answer really is coming from our wise mind and not our rational or emotional mind. And the way you can do this is by asking yourself these 4 questions. Number 1, during the exercise, was I aware of the objective facts of the situation? Number 2, during the exercise, was I aware of how my body was reacting, i.e. my emotions, or was I just pushing it all below the surface? Number 3, does this answer align with my core values? And number 4, does this answer feel true to myself? And if your response to these 4 questions is yes, then you can be sure that this answer is coming from your wise mind. Now, at this point, if this exercise is sounding really abstract to you and you're skeptical of it, I get it. All I can say to that is just give it a try. Just see how it goes. There's really no harm in trying. Also, an important heads up about wise mind answers. Don't be surprised if what your wise mind is telling you to do scares you. Just because it's an answer from your wise mind doesn't mean it's not going to involve any fear or discomfort. Our rational mind is usually the voice of caution, so it's probably going to tell us to go down the route that feels safer and more comfortable. On the other hand, our wise mind is the voice of courage. It's encouraging us to expand ourselves, our opportunities, and our future. So it's probably going to tell us to go down the path that feels riskier and scarier. We're scared of failing. We're scared of what other people might think of us. In fact, you might not even want to do what your wise mind is telling you to do because it's scary, even though deep down you know it's the right thing to do and what you truly want to do. So let me tell you how we can overcome that fear right now by reminding ourselves that we're all gonna die one day. Not to be blunt or anything, but like reminding ourselves that we'll all be dead eventually is the quickest, most effective reality check to remind ourselves of what really matters most at the end of the day and what we're gonna regret if we never give a try. Reminding ourselves that our time is limited also gives us perspective of the big picture and might help us to realize that yes, while doing what our wise mind is telling us to do is going to involve discomfort, that discomfort might only be for the short term. And in the long term, it would actually lead us to the life we've always wanted. Whereas on the other hand, if we followed our rational or our emotional mind, yes, that might keep us comfortable in the short term, but in the long term, it's actually going to lead to more problems, more pain, more frustration, more regret. And I don't know, in my opinion, that sounds even more risky. Whether you go down the rational, emotional, or wise mind route, all routes are going to involve risk along the way, and all routes have the same end destination, death, but we still get to choose which set of risks we'd rather have along the way. Of course, we can never fully predict how any decision is going to turn out, but by accessing our wise mind with this exercise, we can at least make sure that we're making an intentional decision that's realistic and that's true to ourselves and what we want most out of life. If you'd like some more guidance on decision making, I'll leave a link to another video over here where I go over how to avoid a very common mistake that a lot of us make when we're faced with a tough decision. It's got some more decision making tools in there, so I hope that that's helpful for you as well. But in any case, I hope that you are doing well. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Bye.